I've always felt like I don't fit these beauty standards anyway, being a black woman, being not rake thin, and now being bald. I don't feel like have ever fit into that beauty standard.
Hi Gina, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to have this conversation, and welcome.
Thank you for having me. Glad to meet you both, and yeah, let's get going.
So we have you on the show today because we wanted to talk about, we found your Instagram account basically, where you talk about your experience with alopecia and also about your business creating wigs. And I've been diving into your story. So you're based in the UK, you're a mom of 2 girls, you're the founder of Gina Knight Wig Design. You've been doing that for about 10 years now. You're also a model. And yeah, on your social and on your website, you talk about your alopecia journey, trying to raise awareness about this topic that is not very known by, I think, most people.
Yeah.
So maybe we can start with a little something that I've noticed on your Instagram is on Instagram your name is Gina Atinuke Knight, and I was wondering where your name Atinuke was coming from.
Yeah, so that's my middle name. I changed my name when I was 7 years old because from 11 months old I was in private foster care. I was brought over by my Nigerian mum who left me with a family to then went back to Nigeria, and it was quite common in the 80s and I think from the 1960s it's been quite common. It's almost like not necessarily a status symbol because there's different economic reasons for doing it. Some of the parents were studying and some just really wanted that status symbol of saying, oh, my child is being nannied in England. But it was very much an unregulated kind of experience. I was lucky enough to be put with a private foster parent who had Nigerian children before, was known to social services in a good way, not known to social services in a bad way. But they were known to have these children, so it was all very. I used to get visits from a social worker and things like that. But there are many cases where, in fact, that never happened, and children would just be left with random families. And I've heard over time, I've been sharing my story about private fostering. And it used to be called farming. So you'd be farmed out to different families. And in a lot of cultures, it's very common. But it was very prevalent in the UK with Nigerian people of Nigerian heritage and Nigerian people. And we would just be sort of left there. And it kind of, there's a lot to be said for the types of people that would do this, or because there was a lot of cases of answering ads like, oh, I need someone to look after a 3-year-old, or I need someone to look after an 11-month-old.
Right.
And I was 11 months old at the time. In hindsight, over the years I've learned lots of different things about the circumstances and the reasons that it happened to me. But my when I was born 10 weeks early, so I was very small. And I went back to Nigeria I assume, for 11 months. It's all very unclear to me. But came back because at a later date, I realized that my mum had said, my birth mum had said that because I was so small and I had breathing problems, she was really scared that I would die. So she brought me back to the UK because of the NHS and because of all these different things. And then for reasons that I won't go into, she didn't return until I was 7 years old. So during that time, I was calling my private foster parents mum and dad, and I became the only private foster child that they had at that time. And around 7, I decided to change my name. So I took their last name and I picked a new first name. I was literally like, I don't want any sort of links to my heritage or my culture. But this is coming from the head space of a 7-year-old.
Yeah.
In hindsight, maybe they shouldn't have let me completely disregard parts of myself. but it was the 80s and no one really cared. So I changed my name, and then later on, and this is quite recently, I haven't changed my name back. I'm still Gina Knight, but I just on social media I use my first name, my first birth name, just as a gentle nod to my heritage, I guess, because it's I didn't mention, but my private foster parents were actually white, so there was always that kind of disconnect between myself and my heritage and my blackness. So it was kind of like quite a quite a strange thing to have to relearn that over years, because I would never really be able to connect with my peers. And that brings me on to the reason why I love hair so much, and especially as a Black woman, is that it helps me connect with with people who look like me. It helps me connect with other women, especially because we have this thing in common. We have this hair in common, and we have the same struggles with it. We have the same joys with it. So it's always been important to me from a young age, and it's really helped me to connect and grow within the Black community.
Before we continue with the hair discussion, alopecia and things, I'm just wondering, so you said your birth mum came back to England when you were 7. Have you had a relationship with her since? Like, do you
Not
talk to her?
particularly.
No.
It's been very on and off. Like as I get older, I understand her more, and I understand the reasons why she did the things that she did. But I think the last time I saw her in the flesh, I was 13. So
Wow, okay.
It's almost like a lot of it is very much just the ship has sailed. I have no ill will, but there's no real, I'm very much a once something has happened, I've just sort of dealt with it now, and I don't really want to go back over old ground. So having there's never going to be that kind of mother-daughter relationship, but I think that can be said for a lot of people who, the mother-daughter, I have 2 daughters. I know that the mother-daughter relationship will continue to be something that I'm going to have to work on. But yeah, I think we don't really just have that kind of relationship, and that's fine. I don't feel like I feel like I've missed out on a lot of things, but that being said, I think people go through worse, I guess. I feel like I've just evolved and moved on from it. Like I don't need that relationship as much as I used to think I needed it when I was younger. I just sort of decided that it was never going to happen, so there's no point in trying to force it. And we're just completely different people culturally, the way we think, it's especially within the Nigerian culture, and African culture as a whole. It's very academic. It's very, you have to, if like being working creative industry is something that you wouldn't really do, and just even the basic things like that. She's like, oh, why aren't you working in a bank? Why aren't you an accountant? Why? So I was like, I don't know maths. It's like, I don't know. And just being, I'm just quite a liberal, open person, and she's very not. So, and I think that as much as we can be, you have parents and they're your mum and your dad, or they're your mum. You don't have to get along. We don't have, and we haven't had that. It's like meeting your mum at 30 and thinking that you have to be connected straight away, like that we're just going to have things in common. You don't, even when you're born with your mum and she raises you, it doesn't necessarily correlate into having anything in common. We're completely different people. And I think trying to force that now at the age that I am, nearly 40 years old, is like I'm respectful of my elder, but that's literally where it ends. That's about it,
And then in terms of did you get adopted then? Because you said you had foster parents. Did they adopt you in the end?
I had foster parents, and they got legal guardianship of me. They couldn't actually adopt me because they were too old. So yeah, they just got custody of me until I was 18, and which was the same basically. It's technically the same. When you're adopted, it's the same thing. It's just not officially adoption. It's custody. It's
a technicality.
Yeah, it's like custody, care, and control of the minor. So that's what happened. And yeah, it's a very, very odd sort of way to grow up. It always makes me think. I always stood out as a youngster, and I've never sort of blended in for no want of my own. I would quite like to blend in sometimes, but yeah, it's always like the girl who's got no mum, the girl who or her mum and dad are white, or just there's always something. So yeah, it was a very interesting childhood.
Well, thank you for sharing. It sounds like it was something that happened quite a lot, like you said, in the 80s and things, but I wasn't
No, I've never heard of
aware of it. Yeah, I didn't know that happened. I didn't know
Yeah,
anyone that happened to.
a lot of quite famous people are private fostered. So like Linford Christie, Lorraine Pascal, the she was a chef. There's quite a few. A British director made a film called Farming, and he has a very famous story where uh, he joined like a right wing group as a black man, and he was private fostered, and he put out a film about it, which I haven't watched because I feel like I would be traumatized. So I haven't gone down there and actually watched it. But when I spoke about it for the first time publicly, so many people contacted me, telling me that, like, mirroring my story almost exactly to the word, to the dates. Some of them as well, as people who are, my age mates who it has happened to, and I genuinely grew up thinking I was one of the very few people that it ever happened to. So yeah, it was really, I think it just goes to show sometimes the importance of social media and not being the cesspool of trolling. It can actually bring people together and let people share their story. So
it's very often the case when we go through, it can be any, most of the time, difficult experience, that we feel very lonely when it's happening at the time, because we don't know anyone in our close environment that has went through the same thing. But actually, when you look on the internet and social media, and we discover that we're not alone, and finding this sense of, if we are looking for it, belonging, and we can talk to people about it and share things if it's something that's necessary. It's often the case, I feel, for many diverse stories and experiences that people go through.
Yeah, I think so.
So it's really interesting what you said about growing up in a white family and being in a sense disconnected to your blackness, right? Because I guess it was a white community also that you grew up around, not just your foster parents, right?
No, well, actually, I grew up in Southeast London, which is very diverse.
Okay.
Which is why I probably say that my experience wasn't as bad as some of the experiences that I've heard about, simply because I had neighbors and I had friends, and I would go to school and there would be people who looked like me. It was more of an internalized thing at home, like the microaggressions of being the only black person or black child within certain situations. And just culturally, like being like just simply being able to do my hair. My mum couldn't do my hair; she didn't know how to do my hair, and because of the era that we were in, it's not like now. Like now if you were going to adopt outside your race, you would learn these things. You would have to learn these things. I've spoken to social workers and things like that, and they're very, very like. It's very difficult to foster children who aren't from the same ethnic background as you, which I'm sort of on the fence about whether that's good or bad. But I think as someone who grew up in that situation, I can tell you that it's so important to embrace that culture that child is from, and try your best to facilitate and put that child in front of their culture as much as you possibly can without being weird about it, I guess. But yeah, I found that a lot of people, me growing up within a more multicultural neighborhood and area, was like really beneficial to me, because I've heard stories of people who grew up in Devon or in really predominantly white areas where, not saying that, I don't know if Devon's predominantly white anymore, but I would assume so.
I would assume so, yeah.
Yeah, it's like you know, and how that affected them and how they see themselves. I never ever grew up thinking that that like black wasn't beautiful. I grew up around amazing women. I think I was very lucky at, especially at my high school, that I was always put into mentorship programs because I think they thought you need it, with like um, really amazing black women who were business owners, and you know, those are the people that I used to look up to, and it was like I had a lot of mentors growing up, so I think that's what helped me. Even to this day, like my friends' mums, I was always very much like, I would have mixed race and black friends, and they had black mums, and I would sort of gravitate towards them and sort of embrace and learn it as much as I could, because I know that when I went home I didn't have that. I will prefix that with saying that I love my foster mum. She's passed away now, but she was a very caring and nurturing woman in terms of like just being a very nice lady. But sometimes being a nice lady just isn't enough. When you're raising a child that doesn't look like you, and also raising a child that is will have all the issues of just being in foster care anyway, and being sort of adopted anyway, is always going to have those issues. Even when you are adopted into very wonderful circumstances, shall we say, like if I was one of Angelina Jolie's children, I'm sure I'd be like jumping around with excitement. But also that does still come with issues. It's not like, you know, transracial adoption is an issue overall, and there's a fine line between, you know, wanting to be a good adoptive or foster parent and white saviorism. So the line is very thin, and it can be detrimental to the child, which is the most important prefix. I think what we should be trying to do, especially in today, and I hope that is what we're doing today, is trying to save families, you know, and help people stay with their parents, you know, and help the underlying issues of why someone would feel the need to leave their child, or the, you know, what is the reason that this child is in foster care or private foster care, you know. And I think maybe today that is something that would be more looked into, but in the 60s, 70s and 80s it was just a case of, you know, that woman's left her child, so we're going to give you to this nice white couple because you know, politics or whatever. But yeah, so I think those kind of the issues with identity is really what affected me more, as opposed to anything else. So when I walked outside my house, there was lots of diversity, there's lots of different people, but even with that, it's like I couldn't really connect with other Nigerian children of immigrants, because they had a different culture. They grew up differently to me. The culture is so intricate and detailed that there are still things that I don't even understand. I still struggle to talk to people, to black women or black men or anyone on a level in regards to culture, especially due to Nigerian culture, because there's things that I just would never understand, because I didn't grow up like that. I didn't grow up in that sort of environment. So just down to, for example, different types of foods, ways of parenting, you know, there's just different things that I would happily say to someone, and as a Nigerian child, you wouldn't say that. Like, I would say how I feel. And I think that that's very different. If you grew up within a Nigerian household, you wouldn't necessarily be able to speak your truth without being reprimanded for it, because there's a very much a respect your elders kind of thing, and that's across the board in many different cultures. But yeah, I find that my relaxed upbringing doesn't really come across very well. You know, so a bit too liberal, a bit too mouthy. Mm.
It's who you are.
Yeah, exactly.
You
And I
know.
think we live and we learn, but I think that
Yeah.
was probably the most those sort of slight differences were the ones
Yeah.
that I dealt with the most. And I find that I got on with my life, and I got on with being a kid and just whatever, it was fine. But when I look back, some of the situations that I was in, probably wasn't okay. There was
Mm.
like things that were said to me and things that I witnessed that wasn't okay. So, but that's hindsight, and that's being able to look at it it through the lens of today, um, where you wouldn't be able to, say that, disregard someone's hair and say, oh, it looks like it's too tough, it's too this, it's too that, it looks like a Brillo pad. Or there's things that were saying to my face, like with all jovalism, and it was just sort of brushed under the carpet, and it's just okay. Like I grew up, to the way I explain it, the best way I can explain it is growing up in a environment where I was okay because I was one of them, nudge nudge. So I wasn't like other black people, so I was okay. But you would still say things about other ethnicities and other black people, like I'm not in the room kind of thing, because
Yeah.
it's because I was raised by them, so I'm okay kind of thing.
Right.
It's that's the only real way that I can explain it.
Yeah.
And that leaves a very sort of weird taste in the mouth, if you know what I mean. So
Yeah.
No, yeah, that makes sense. So if we fast forward like a few years, when did you first, and maybe you couldn't put a label on it at the beginning, but when did you first experience hair loss? Because I guess at the beginning maybe you didn't know that was alopecia.
Yeah, so I will say that from a young age, I was really interested in hair. Like I was saying, it was my sort of bridge to connect with people who look like me. So I was doing my hair from the age of 8. I was braiding other people's hair, earning my little pocket change,
Wow.
making entrepreneurial spirits right out the womb. But yeah, so I was really interested in doing hair. I used to learn. I learned how to plait and do all these things to my hair. I started a job when I left university. I did a university course in art, and then I decided to work in retail, obvious as you do. And then I started to work in the salon industry, as salon manager, and I was working for a company called Aveda, which is a very natural, holistic company. And I started to like think about what I was putting into my body and onto my body, and in regards to health and beauty. And I started a beauty blog called Natural Belle, where I would talk about black women especially returning to their natural hair, and how to take care of it, how to look after it, and all that stuff. And I was doing that from 2008 successfully until around 2012, when I became pregnant with my first child. I started to notice that I was thinning at the top of my head. Really unusual. I was like, oh, that doesn't seem right. It was getting itchy, inflamed. I went to the doctors, and straight away, the response from the doctor was really disappointing, because it was almost like they had sort of racially profiled me straight as soon as I walked through the door. This person is here. She's black. She's coming to talk about her hair. It's because she relaxes it, puts braids in it, puts weaves in it, does this, not knowing that I don't do any of those things, because since 2008 I've been talking about how to look after your hair. No other kind of research was done. I was given a topical ointment and told to go on my merry way. It got worse and worse and worse. I went back a second time, and they said, oh, it's your postpartum shedding, not to worry about it. It'll even out in the end. So in a year it'll all even out, because that's what happens. And I was like, I obviously believe that, because that does happen. And that's probably what was happening to a point, but simultaneously I was losing my hair to, unbeknownst to me, CCCA, which is a form of hair loss that not so much is known about it. It's something that affects a lot of black women, and it possibly could be triggered by hair practices, but that's not the reason that people have it. And because our doctors are general practitioners, I don't expect them to know a lot about hair. But what I do expect is empathy and compassion. But there wasn't really any of that, and I kind of had to do my own research, because after that year, not only was my hair thinning because of postpartum shedding, but there was like patches of hair loss, and it was very, very noticeable. And that's when I became really distraught about my hair loss. And plus I had just had a baby, so I had like postnatal depression, my hair was falling out in droves. It was a really depressing time when I should be having a great time because I'm a new mom, and like of all the things I should be stressing about, it shouldn't be my hair. So when I started to do my own research, because it's like no one's going to help me, no one's really listening to what I'm trying to say. And whilst doing all this, I was hiding the fact that my hair was falling out, because at the time I had a blog, it was quite successful, I was talking about looking after your hair, and I felt really fraudulent, and like no one's going to listen to me talk about hair stuff when I don't have any hair. I was working in a hairdresser's at the time, and my life just revolves around material, like how I look, hair, and everything. So, and it was just a really strange sort of place at that place that I was at that time. So I would experiment with different things like extensions and wigs, and then I realized that there wasn't anything that really matched my texture. So I was trying to hide my bald spots, and I was like, oh, well, I need clip-in extensions that are going to match that, or I need a wig that's going to match the rest of my hair because I don't want people to know because I'm being sneaky. And so that's how my business was born, I guess. It was like out of necessity for myself, which is so true of so many businesses that are run by Black women. It's that we're always kind of left out of the narrative, so we have to make it ourselves, otherwise it's not going to happen. So I started to look at different types of hair extensions and what can happen, and how we can make it actually match our hair textures. I'm not saying I invented it. It was there before, but it wasn't, people weren't sort of highlighting it as a possibility. And even today, it's still very much like when we have the NHS service here, and you can get wigs from the NHS, but they're always very Eurocentric types of wigs. So there's still that kind of there's still that disconnect where the beauty standard is just, white, and everyone else sort of has to make do, or sort of try and assimilate, or go the other way. But I researched the hair loss that I had. I found out that quite a lot of people have this form of hair loss, and when I started talking about it publicly, which wasn't until quite recently, like I'd say maybe around 2016 is when I started to talk about my hair loss journey. And that's when I was still in that headspace of, oh, it's going to be okay, I'm going to try and grow it back, and it's I'm just going to use this product and that product. And I was talking about all the things that I was going to try and do, and I was talking about what's working, what's not working, like, because I'd have the hair that was healthy would grow, and it would be like, oh yeah, it's growing back, but it wasn't. So I had this sort of, I was talking about that journey and doing my own research and finding out that so many people have centrifugal cicatricial alopecia. It's a mouthful, but we call it CCCA, and it's something that is a permanent form of hair loss. So it starts in the center and it spreads slowly. It's linked to autoimmune. It's also linked to thyroids. It's said to be genetic. There's so many theories, but not a lot of research. And again, I think overall with alopecia there isn't a lot of research. But especially with CCCA, that they just, no one knows, and it's kind of just like, oh, get on with it kind of thing, because it's not. I think people tend to disregard the impact of losing your hair, and not having any control over it, because I remember being like 18, 21, 25 and having crazy hairstyles, and like I'd have a really low crop, or I'd take it quite low and then bleach it blonde and do all these things, but that was my choice. So when it becomes not your choice and your hair just falls, people will say, oh yeah, but you've had short hair before, or you've got a nice shaped head, you're fine. And it's like, yeah, but you don't understand. It's more to do with feeling like you don't have any control over your body or over yourself, or how you want to present yourself to the world. So I think that's where it gets sort of like, people fail to understand the impact of losing your hair. Because if any other part of your body was just randomly falling off, you'd be concerned. But it seems like when our hair falls out, it's like, oh, it's just hair, stop being so vain, kind of thing. So
for a lot
yeah,
of people though, for a lot of people though, it's their like part of their identity and also a bit of a
oh
security
yeah,
blanket.
most definitely. I think
like it's part of
I
how
think
you
it's one of
present
those things
yourself.
where people don't think about it until it happens to them.
Yeah.
And or someone they know, and then they realize how it can impact them. And especially for me personally, like, because of what I was saying before about it being a way I connected with people, that I went through a massive grieving kind of process when I started to lose my hair, because I felt like, oh, I'm not gonna be able to talk to people. I'm not gonna be anything without my hair, because I was that girl. I talked about hair all the time, and it was my living. It's what I did. So, I went to work and I talked about hair, because I was, with customers and in the salon, and, talking about all these fun things. And then I go home and start up my computer and write about hair. So when I've started to lose my hair, I was like, what the heck am I going to do? Like, what am I going to even talk about? Not knowing, I felt very bereft, because I felt like I'd lost a whole community of people. Not knowing that actually there's another community of people who are going through exactly the same thing as I'm going through. And even the people that aren't, and who were still in my natural hair sort of era, are still with me now, and they're still supporting me, and they're still talking to me, because at the end of the day, 50% of women will have noticeable hair loss in their lifetime, whether that's from having illness, whether that is from postpartum, or even down to we're seeing a lot of people with hair loss at the moment due to COVID. So it's more of a thinning of the hair due to the infection, due to the virus, messing with how our hair grows, and it just sort of shocks the system. And you'll notice that 3 to 4 months after you have COVID, or it's not just COVID, it's any kind of virus or viral infection, that the hair will start to fall out. Thankfully, it's something that does usually grow back, but we are seeing a lot of people talking about COVID and the correlation with hair loss. So I think it's even more than 50% of people, really. But I think the stigma is that, especially for women, it's a part of how we're seen as attractive or beautiful or whatever. And I know people say, oh, but men have hair loss too, and they do, and it does affect men as well. But there are lists with world's hottest bald man, like in GQ magazine. They have lists. There's no list for the sexiest bald woman. And it's like the highest paid one of the highest paid actors in the world is The Rock, and he's a bald man. And it's like there's a difference. Like a bald man is like, can be seen as a sexy man who's like, it doesn't reflect particularly negatively on that person. I know that they can be often the butt of the joke, and bald guys, whatever, but it's almost like when we add that on to what the world expects of women and how we're supposed to present ourselves and look, and the beauty standard as a whole, it can be really depressing and really quite harmful to how we just go about our daily life. And it's why it does affect people, and it's why it's hard to explain how it affects you, because nothing you say comes across as not vain to some people, if you're not kind of versed in it and understand that those beauty standards do matter. And unfortunately, as someone who was around in the sort of late 90s, early 2000s, that's when I was a teenager, and it was like, I've always felt like I don't fit these beauty standards anyway, being a black woman, being not rake thin, and now being bald. I don't feel like I've ever fit into that beauty standard. but does that mean that that beauty standard doesn't affect me and the way I think, the way I act, the way I think about other people? It's so there's just so much unlearning that we have to do when it comes to how we see people, and I think that's with the advancements of social media, we've been able to. I think it's been quite a positive turnaround because now we have a body positivity community, we have an alopecia community, we are in contact with those people, we can create what we see, as opposed to when I was younger, I could only see what the media wanted me to see.
What was in magazines or
Exactly, that's what we live for. It's like, oh, I saw it in the magazine, I saw it on TV, and that was all created by usually white rich men.
old
So
white men.
we've had that pumped into us like from a young age that this is what we're supposed to look like. Even I would say even down to Disney princesses and things like that, we've always been told that it is like long hair, white skin or light skin, and that's what's beautiful, that's who gets the prince in the end, that's who that's who finishes first, that's who gets the happily ever after in the movie. And I think with social media that we have been able to slightly change that narrative, and give people who don't look like that, who aren't perfection, a chance to express themselves and to share their stories. So I think that's what's been really important, but I'm going off on a tangent.
No, I wanted to actually talk about that because it's very true what you said. Like for men, if when you get older you lose your hair, it just happened, it's one of those things. So okay, just people accept it just because we are men. On the other side, it's true that hair and I would say femininity is very connected. Like from a young age, when you get like girls' toys, it's a Barbie with long hair, it's a doll, and you learn how to brush the hair of your doll, and like it's really part of the when you're a little girl, it's very a central part of the thing. It's like, oh, we are going out for dinner or for a wedding, so we're gonna do your hair, and it's a central part of I think the feminist culture and stuff like that. That's what the media is telling us, at least, and that's the image that we are getting from the beauty industry and stuff. And I can imagine that it's interesting also because it happened to you when you were an adult. When I think if it happened to you when you were like a child or a teenager, maybe the experience could be different in terms of self-confidence, when you're building your personality and things like that. But even as an adult, I'm sure, it must have been affecting your confidence as a woman, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think that it definitely affected and still does, because I said that in 2016 is when I started to talk about it, but I was still hiding it. So I was talking about it, so people knew that was happening under the wigs and the extensions and the wigs, but I was still hiding it.
Right.
And it got to the point where I was like obsessed and self-conscious about, if I put it in this style, people are going to see that there's this and there's that. If I had my hair in a ponytail, you could see that it was thinning in the middle. I'd always have to wear a certain hairstyle for no one to notice, or wear a wig. And then it became like, oh, can people see the wig? Can people see this? And it just became a whole sort of process that became very tiresome. And then when I was pregnant with my second child, I knew that the postpartum shedding would start up again, and that I would have to go through that whole my hair falling out excessively, not just gradually like it does with CCCA. And I just thought, I can't go for it again. I can't do it again. So, and I want to enjoy this is going to be the last baby. So I want to actually enjoy this time in my life, because it's going to be the last time it happens, hopefully. And so I said, oh, I'm just gonna cut it off. And my partner was like, thank God, because you stress about it so much. It's just literally all you think about and all you talk about. You just need to get rid of it because you're not happy. And I was like, yeah, I know. So I went to where I worked at the time, and they cut it off for me. And as soon as I had done it, I took a picture, and then I put a hat on. And I was like, and I still continue to cover it up. And it's only until very recently that I actually feel better without a wig than I do with a wig. And that, but it's been a long process. I shaved my hair and have not grown hair back since 2018, and it's only, I would say, since during the pandemic and after that I feel actually better, and that I feel like, no, this is me. I feel confident. I still wear wigs, but I use them not as a crutch but as a accessory, and just to go with all my other personalities. So I just use it to, you know, like a coat, like a pair of earrings, instead of actually holding onto it like it's a lifeline. And I think that is what has been such a long process. And it's like, I think I didn't just wake up one morning and feel confident and feel feminine. I just didn't. I used to, when I first shaved off my head, I almost completely changed my style, because I'm a very girly girl, let's say. And I like dresses, and I like feminine things, or what people would assume is a feminine thing. I don't really care, but it's like, I felt like I couldn't wear dresses because I didn't have any hair, and I felt like I didn't match, or I just felt I looked weird and odd, and like, because in my mind, pretty girls pretty girls have hair. That's what I've been told my whole life, that pretty girls have hair, and that women have long hair. And because I've spent so long going back to natural and overcoming that kind of stigma, because there's also that to deal with, like texturism, and we, as Black women especially, it's like we have to learn to love our hair again, from being told that we have to straighten it, relax it, put weaves in it. So there was that. So I had gotten to the point where I absolutely loved my hair and was accepting my hair, and then for it to all fall out, and I have to do this self-love thing all over again. And I'm like, it's tiring reflecting on yourself constantly to try and not have the world's views impact you. You know, and it's like, and I mean, it's not like every day I look in the mirror and think you look amazing, but it's more days than it's not now, because it used to be a point where I just wouldn't look in the mirror and I just hated it. I just hated not having hair. And you know, I think I felt more conscious of it than other people. I think most negativity that I've ever gotten about my hair, or lack of it, is online as opposed to in real life. Like, people in real life aren't, or in general, people aren't awful. So I don't really get that whole, you know, I get stared at sometimes, but I think it's more of a sympathetic, or it's a curiosity, as opposed to anything else, because they're like, why is she bald, like properly bald? Why does she not have any hair? And then sometimes I think people just assume and diagnose you with whatever they want to diagnose you with. And then they see you with kids, and I get sympathetic looks like, oh, it doesn't look like she's got long left. And I'm like, I'm fine.
I was wondering if you get that kind of cancer, like, treatment,
so
I guess, or like,
it's like, I've had that a lot, and I don't find it offensive to me personally. I just find it like, why would you ask that? Like, who wants to talk about that? Like, who wants to talk about their health like that to a complete stranger? Like, just randomly coming up to you and talking about cancer is just a very strange thing to do. And I've had it happen to me twice, and it's just very odd. But yeah, I think now, with everything that's happened in recent months, with alopecia being in the news, people realize what it is, and they understand a bit more what it is. So when you see someone, that's not automatically their first thought, I would hope now, which I think is a really important turning point, because especially before, when we were talking about body positivity, I think sometimes hair is missed out on that, because when we think about the body, we think about, you know, curves, and we think about, you know, plus size, or we think about, you know, not fat shaming people, or not doing this, not doing that. It's like, we don't think about the overall, and I think that is something that's important. And also the hair industry itself is very focused on hair loss, but it's very focused on hair loss as it being a problem, and something that we need to fix. So we have a lot of elixirs and and grow your hair back and do this and do that. And it's almost like that is what the focus is on. When we look at hair ads and representation, we see the very thick, luscious, beautiful hair that I'd say more than 50% of us do not have, being showed to us. Or we see, if you do have hair loss, it's a problem. Yeah. So you need to fix it, and you need to try this product to plump your hair, or you need to find this product to alleviate this. You need to put this oil on it. Try this holistic concoction. Try this now tablet. And it's just a lot of there's no sort of acceptance of what is. And I think if we were to see in the adverts people with thinning hair, with patches, but still being represented as worthy of being in an ad campaign, then maybe there wouldn't be that sort of stigma for hair loss, and it wouldn't, when or if it ever happened to you, you wouldn't feel as traumatized by it. Because I just find it odd that I've worked in the hair industry since 2010, I think that's when I started working in a hairdresser. And every day someone would come in with a hair issue. Every day someone would have thinning hair, and we'd have ladies who'd come in and they'd get their blow dry and everything, and they just have extremely fine hair. Or we'd get older ladies who would have like bald patches and things like that, and it was a daily occurrence. It wasn't unusual for someone to be coming into the salon with not perfect hair. People have thin hair, people have weak hair, people have damaged hair, and that's like actually the majority. It's not that it's weird that you have this amazing hair. You're like a peacock. It's like it's amazing, but it's not every day. It's not everyone's thing. And there's so many different forms of alopecia as well. I think that people tend to get very confused about what alopecia is and more importantly what it isn't. And I think
I was going to ask you about that, because I keep taking notes. I've got so many things to ask you, but like I thought that alopecia you got through stress, and that was kind of, I mean, I don't know anything about alopecia, I admit it, but that was kind of the only thing I thought I knew, was that if you were stressed, like I've seen 2 influencers talk about it and having like bald patches, and then it grows back, and there's this like, oh, I took these pills and look at how wonderful it is, it's all back to normal. I've now got a healthy lifestyle. And it's like, okay, well, so that's what I kind of thought it was. So obviously there's different types of alopecia.
Alopecia and stress actually hasn't been proven. It hasn't been proven that alopecia is caused by stress. It definitely can be a contributing factor. And I think what you're talking about is alopecia areata, which is actually an autoimmune form of alopecia, where you get coin-sized patches here, there, and everywhere, and they do come and go. The follicle isn't dead, so hair can grow back. And again, because of the lack of research, we don't really know exactly why it happens. But then we have different forms of alopecia. So we have alopecia univalis, which is I do believe that I get it confused, but there's one called univalis and one called totalis. So univalis is the hair, and so the whole head, you lose all the hair. All the hair on the head is lost. And you may lose your brows and lashes, and that's called alopecia univalis. And then we have alopecia totalis, where you lose absolutely every single hair on your body. So we're talking underarm hair, pubic hair, nose hair, every hair is gone. And that's another, again, it's in the same family as alopecia areata, because the hair follicles are not dead and the hair can miraculously grow back. It's been known to, like, there are people out there who've lost all their hair, and then it's just with no interfering or anything, and it's grown back. A lot of the treatments out there for those forms of alopecia are something that you have to take for a lifetime if you want it to work. So there's a new drug on the market. Well, it's not a new drug. It was used for arthritis, but they found that if you take it, it can grow back and stimulate the hair again. But you have to continue to take it. The same with the injections into the scalp. You have to continue to take these things. So it can be really, quite a big, I think a lot of people do try it. People try everything, but it's the long run of it,
Yeah.
where you have to sort of kind of come to terms with the fact that it's this condition, it will just happen, and there's not much we can do about it if it happens. There's not, my form of alopecia is a permanent scarring form of alopecia. So my hair will eventually, it may take many, many years, but eventually it will just completely just be gone, or very thin. So I just decided to pip it at the post and, you know, preempt the inevitable and just shave it off. But if I was to grow out my hair, there would be, I'd have sides and stuff, there would just be, it would be very thin, and then I'd have a patch in the middle that would spread gradually. But then there are other forms of alopecia which still count as alopecia, like traction alopecia, which is the type of alopecia that you get from tension on the hair. So high ponytails, weaves, wigs, different things like that that cause damage to the follicle, and the hair will fall out. And this, if you treat it early enough, this can be curable, but this can cause permanent and lead on to permanent hair loss. So there's that form of alopecia, and then even losing your hair through chemotherapy is a form of alopecia, because alopecia as a word just means hair loss. It's just the medical term for hair loss. So it doesn't matter what the reason is, you still have a form of alopecia. So it's just an umbrella term for any type of medical hair loss. So it can be from traction, it can be trichotillomania, where you pull, hair pulling, where you pull the hair out yourself. It's still alopecia. So yeah, there's so many different forms. There's frontal fibrosing alopecia, which just very strangely only affects from ear to ear and in the brows. So you would have completely clean up until here, and then hair. And that's something that is becoming quite common. It's with women going through menopause, but I'm seeing quite a lot of younger women as well that it's happening to. So yeah, there's so many different forms, and so little is known about them, and so little research is being done to try and, I don't necessarily think that it's particularly like looking for a cure, because I'm personally beyond that now. I think just having answers is just a really great place to start. Like, why is this happening? I think the why is more important to the how we can fix it. I want to know the why it happened. And then you can sort of go from there. But sort of throwing medicine at it and, you know, trying to cure it, and this industry is booming, this curing industry is booming because it's like worth billions and billions of pounds. But no one's talking about the emotional aspect of losing your hair. No one's talking about the way that we're diagnosed, and the way that most people see alopecia as, because it's not life-threatening, that we don't need to care about it, you know?
Yeah, it's not that bad. It could be worse. And
exactly. And I think that, especially when we've recently had people taken their life due to alopecia and due to the bullying of it, it is life-threatening, because at the end of the day, children especially are very likely to have alopecia areata, univalis, or totalis from a very young age. And it takes a very strong character to be that young and have it not affect them. And unfortunately, very recently, a young girl took her life, and it's like this. It's only now that you're starting to realize, no, it is serious, and it can affect people and how they see themselves, and, you know, and that goes on to like how other people treat you, and bullying and things like that. And I think for children, it would be so. I connect with so many people who are sort of outgoing because I'm online, and so I'm connecting with other people who have an online presence, or who will post. If you're going to post a picture of yourself bald online, you'll probably have that slight level of confidence. But there are so many people out there that maybe don't do that, or hide away, or don't talk about it. So there's still lots of work to be done in that area. But things like Alopecia UK, the charity, and there's so many focus groups and people trying to help the emotional side, which I think is really important. What I would have loved when I went to the doctors was for the doctor just to be honest and say, there's probably nothing I can do about your hair loss because we don't know why you're losing your hair, but here is some emotional support for what you may go through, you know? So it's almost like I don't want tablets, I want therapy. So, you know, I would like some emotional support for what I'm going to be going through without having to feel like I'm overreacting or that it's not that serious and it's not that deep. And for some people it isn't, you know?
No, but I
But for
think
a majority of us it is.
I think like you said also before, it's about changing the narrative as a society. It's about
Yeah.
why, we need to stop attaching hair loss with something wrong. There is something wrong with you. Like this is the narrative that should be stopped, because this is what ultimately is causing the pain, the emotional pain, because we attach so much importance to our hair because of a society reason in a way, and if we could detach those two things, and like you said before, and it's very interesting what you said about when we talk about body positivity, we usually talk about like the shape of the body, and we never hear about hair loss, which I mean, it's exactly the same. It's another form, and it should be included into the body positivity
it's still
chatter.
a
It's very
representation. It's still a physical difference that isn't technically the norm. And I find that the movement as a whole doesn't really include hair loss, or it's kind of forgotten. I think it's changing slightly now, but again, that's due to recent events and the fact that now it's in the headlines and people are talking about it. I think the Google rate of alopecia after the Oscars went up tenfold, and people began to talk about it. And I think that's what was the most important thing that came out of that whole situation. It's like was that fact that people were talking about alopecia, regardless of how you feel about the incident. People are now talking about alopecia, and I think that is something that can only really be, you know, applauded, because that's what we need. We need people to talk about it. It's unfortunate that it took that for people to talk, but it's now the conversation is happening, and it's a part of our everyday language, and what we're now talking about and it's being included in these spaces when we're talking about diversity, and we're talking about inclusion, and we're talking about positivity and body image, and changing beauty standards, because as time goes on, we're continuously going to be bombarded with what the ideal is, and we have that all the time. We like I said before about being a child of the 90s and the early 2000s, is that we were told what was beautiful, and we are still being told that we can create more, and if you are of the mind to do that, you can avoid seeing, no shade, but the Kardashians everywhere. You can avoid seeing celebrities everywhere if you were to create what you looked at and just sort of turn a blind eye to what doesn't benefit you. But there are so many impressionable young people who continuously see the same images over and over again, and especially with social media, and the algorithm is so, especially say for example TikTok, the algorithm is so precise that you like one or two videos on a certain body type, that's all you'll see. So all you'll see, that will be perpetuated constantly. Same with young boys. If you like a girl's picture or whatever, that was all you'll see, and you'll think that that's what's normal, that's what a girl's supposed to look like, this is what femininity is, this is what womanhood is, this is what this is. And I think whereas we can say, oh, social media has been so important, it also has that flip side where if you haven't got the sense of mind to sort of filter and try and be diverse in ourselves, because I think that's where it starts, because I think what's popular is we make things popular. Does it make sense? Like we're the ones who are tapping and liking and things like that. So when I say, oh, there's no representation for I remember, I'll take it back, sorry to be confusing, but I remember when I first, early on in my career, and I was talking about in the beauty industry, I was saying there aren't enough shades for darker skin tones. So all these brands, they're bringing out, this was before Fenty and before all that, we didn't have enough shades. We'd go into the drugstore and we wouldn't have enough, it would be like white, beige, dark brown. That's it.
Well, but also there was like 15 white, one beige, maybe one brown, and like that's your choice. So yeah,
exactly. And when we were talking about that, when we were talking about that with brands, and stockists and things like that, they would say, well, it doesn't sell. We've tried to do, we've tried to put the darker shades on the shelves, and they don't sell. And it's like, but they haven't tried to market it, because we can only be what we can see. So if we can't see it, then how are we supposed to be able to purchase it and to make it viable for you as a business to then stock and be able to make money from? Because at the end of the day, capitalism. But in the same breath, it's almost like we as a society also are making these trends. So if we're not actually liking the people who don't look like us, so if I'm on Instagram and then someone else who has long hair, and we're posting the same content, and someone is going to like the person who looks more ideal, then whose fault is that? Is that the brand's fault that their most popular post was someone who overall looks like how you're supposed to look? Or is it the fault of those of us need to change our how we think and what we think of beauty, and what we think of how we think societally, to be able to change that? Because the algorithm is one thing, but we actually control it. The algorithm doesn't work if people don't do the liking and the commenting and things like that. So I think it's like a two-way street.
No, it's having the curiosity to look outside of what you're being shown. It's the algorithm is gonna, or the TV, for that sake, or the newspaper, or showing you what the majority of people want to see based on the data that they have. But it doesn't mean that you cannot make your own research and look outside of the box to see also what's out there. You don't have to stay trapped into this is what we present to you. It's all about the curiosity. Also, what you're saying is interesting. I remember quite recently seeing a post on Instagram about I think it was in the US, like in a supermarket like Target or Walmart, selling how do you say in English, plasters when you cut yourself, like different shades of color. And I didn't know that existed before, but the reason is it's probably been out there for years, but the reason I don't know it exists is because I've never seen an advert on TV about it. Also, every time I see the advert on TV, it's the beige one that's going to fit me. And I've never seen, you see the princess one, you see the dinosaur one for the kids, but you don't see the other shades that they're creating. And if you don't know, you don't know. You can't.
The first time I actually saw that was in a TV show that aired here a couple of years ago. I think it's called Noughts and Crosses or something. It's based on a book. And it's about a dystopian sort of future where the race roles have been reversed. So say we had, like today, how black people are perceived, it was the other way around. So the royalty within that world were black people, and black people were celebrated and whatnot. And there was just one scene where they showed a guy's hand, and he was just doing something, and he had on a brown plaster, and it was so like impactful in that small little moment in the show. It just goes to show what we normalize, because that stood out to me, because I'd never seen that before. Like, he had on a brown plaster. I've always worn beige plasters, like from childhood. It's just been a beige plaster. I wouldn't think, it's only recently, like you say, when I went into a supermarket and I saw that they had brown plasters, and I was like, oh, I'm getting them. And then I was like, and it only works for me because I'm married to a white man and my children are mixed race. So but I'm putting those brown plasters on everybody in the house because I've had to deal with this my whole life. So now you can have a brown plaster. But it's almost like, it's true. You can't, if we don't know it's there, we can't use it.
No, yeah.
And do they do these things on purpose so that we don't see them and then they can have an excuse not to produce them? I don't know. But I think it's definitely about a two-way street in regards to facilitating change in the way, especially within representation and how we're seen and how we and what we see.
Yeah.
So that's why I try my hardest and have been sort of fighting for representation within the alopecia community so that we are seeing in beauty spaces, especially, and in hair spaces, that the people who are losing their hair are still being, represented, because at the end of the day, we still want to feel beautiful. And also, not everyone with hair loss has no hair. Some people still have thinning hair or patches, or their hair grows back and then they lose it again. And to feel like that's not a part of what we go through in life is just very dismissive. So that's why I think when I see an advert, I want to see someone who, not every day they have to have big beautiful hair. It can be, and I feel like even within the modeling industry, within all these industries, we need to see what we all look like, because that percentage is very high. And it's like, especially when we look at beauty and when we look at the hair industry, it's for women, really. When we look at it, it's all sort of directed towards women. When I go into even down to just having a shaved head, when I go into the shop to look at products for shaved heads, I can't find anything for women. So I can't find, everything has a pit ball on it, or a handlebar moustache, or it's all very barber male orientated. It's all very dark. It's like, I want something in the girls section. I don't want to have to use a product that I would use on my legs, on my head, but that's really the only option. And we don't have a lot of, if we're going to focus on scalp care, we don't have a lot of scalp care products that are for the scalp that bald people could also use. I feel like if you're bald, it's always very masculine and manly. Hence why what we said earlier about that male baldness is normalized and female baldness is stigmatized. And that's on all levels, because we don't go into the shops and see ourselves. We don't see ourselves there. So,
I'd never thought of that before.
Oh, yeah, it's a very good point,
yeah. But obviously you don't, unless you experience things like that. You don't, why would you think of it like it's...
Yeah. It's very like anything to do with like shaving or barbering or like, even when I look for a razor to, like a skull razor to shave my head, it's all very like Gillette man, like I'm a man and I shave my head, and it's like I don't really want to buy it, because I don't want that. Can't make it pink. Like I don't know. Like make it rose gold or something. Put a bit of sparkle on it. I don't need this kind of, I just want, or even if it's gender neutral. Like come on, we can do that now too. But everything is very geared towards like masculinity, and that just puts another emphasis on women who are bald. Being defeminized and not being feminine, because we have to shop at those in that area, and it's like, but I'm a girl, and I often get misgendered when I'm not dressed up, I guess, when I've not got my makeup on, and when I'm wearing a hoodie and I'm going to the supermarket. Like the reason that I know that I've been misgendered is because security guards follow me around the shop when I'm because they think I look like a little black boy, and they think I'm up to no good. So there's so many different levels to that kind of discrimination, because now it's like, not only have you misgendered me, but you're also racially profiling me. And it's just a very strange sort of parallel. I've gone to the point where I've actually exposed my bra to a security guard before. I was in a very bad mood, but I was just like looking at him. I was like, "I'm not a boy." Da, 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 da. No, he was just a bit shocked and walked away. I think it was undeserved, to be fair. I took it too
but
far.
like,
but
even if you were a young black boy
reason.
wearing a hoodie, you shouldn't be followed around a store thinking that you're going to be causing trouble. So it's whether you're a boy or not a boy, that still shouldn't happen. So
yeah, I think that it's just such a strange sort of thing, because before losing my hair, I would never have cared if anyone thought I was a boy or a girl or whatever. I wouldn't care. Like, why do I care? But I just felt really, because I thought I looked like a boy, because I didn't have my hair and I thought I looked like a boy. I was very conscious of when I would be misgendered by other people, and it just made me feel like crap the whole time. And it's still something that triggers me. I've recently been on TikTok. I've been on TikTok for about a year, and that the thing with TikTok is it's a very unusual platform where you can end up on the wrong side of it. So your video can go viral for whatever reason, and random people will start commenting. And there was a point earlier in the year where one of my videos went viral for me doing, because I put makeup on my scalp, and I was just showing how I do that, because I'm a content creator and that's what we do. We just show people how to do random stuff. And I was doing that, and then it was fine. It went viral and it was fine, and people were commenting, being very pleasant, blah blah blah. And then it just got to the wrong side of TikTok, and it was just awful. Like, the comments were just disgusting, and I've never seen anything like it. I've never been trolled so mercilessly in my life. Like, do you have cancer? But in a really rude way, not asking in a nice way. You look like the Jada thing. It was around that time, so I think that's what sort of spurred it. Everyone making reference to that, making reference to Will Smith, saying that I looked like is it Mace Windu? I don't watch Star Wars, but basically Samuel Jackson and all this stuff. And I thought, if I woke up, if this was happening to me in 2016 when I first started to talk about my hair loss, I wouldn't have ever talked about it again. So it's about who you are in that moment. It dictates to what you can take in life, because I find that if I was any any more sensitive, I guess, about my condition in that moment, that could have definitely sent me into very hard depression. Because, and I don't think people genuinely think about the things that they say online, and how it can be like prescribed. I think, I don't know, it was just a very odd, weird time in my life. I just it was just very odd, strange period. But that kind of trolling really made it clear to me that things still need to change. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done.
As we're talking about content creation, I've got to point out, I love your Instagram. I love that you're wearing like cute underwear, and you're sexy and flirty and fun, and like, it's almost like I don't know how to word this. Not that I don't notice that you're bold, obviously I see that, but like, I see everything else about you, and it's just, I love how like sexy and fun and flirty you are. And it's, it's not like a sad page like, oh, look at me, boo boo, like boo hoo. It's like empowering and strong, and I love that about your Instagram. Like, it's a very inspirational, like, wow, she's gorgeous, like, with or without, like, when you wear a wig or when you don't, I'm like, she's hot. Like, I love that you do that.
I think I try to make that a conscious kind of thing, to not be woe is me about it to a point. I think that there are some, I feel like I'm just genuinely trying to be very honest about how I'm feeling at the time. And I think my Instagram over the last year, 2 years reflects how I see myself now. So I do tend to feel a lot more positive about myself, and and how I look, and I just try to show that being bald doesn't mean that you have to lose your identity. And my identity was tied up massively in my hair, and I had to learn to understand who I was without it. And funnily enough, I'm still the same person. So it's almost like that's a journey that everyone has to take. And I find that being online and sort of sharing that helps other people to kind of, I guess, sort of see that you can be whoever you want to be, regardless. Like there are so many people with alopecia who will never be confident enough to not wear a wig, or to go out without a wig on and things like that. And that's fine as well, because that's the journey. That's a part of the journey. You can get to the point where you can accept your hair loss for you, but you don't have to. If you feel more confident in a wig, wear a wig. That's absolutely fine. There's nothing where you should feel that you have to
it's not right
look
or
a
wrong.
certain way, you have to do this, But I think showing people that you can still be empowered and you can use wigs as an accessory as opposed to a crutch is really important, and is an important part of the narrative, for people to see that, and I get so many messages from women who the first thing they always say, because I do a lot of like lingerie stuff and things like that, and then some people are like, why are you doing that? And it goes, you don't understand that the number one thing that people talk about when women talk about when they first lose their hair is like, I don't feel sexy anymore, I don't feel beautiful, I think that I just don't feel like myself. And that is like one of the most common issues, like not only just the physical lack of hair, it's the fact that how you feel that you aren't feminine anymore, because and it comes as a shock to a lot of women, because you don't realize how wrapped up we are in that beauty standard, and how you want to feel beautiful for yourself. And it's not anything to do with men, it's not anything to do with arousals or anything like that. It's to do with feeling beautiful and feeling sexy within yourself. And I think that's why I try and show that actually you can still be this way. It doesn't matter, hair doesn't matter, it's just your body size doesn't matter, your shape doesn't matter. It's all about being who you want to be. It's like, I'm 1 year shy of 40, I have 2 children, I'm literally like on there in my pants, and I don't care. It's like, whatever.
I love it.
You have to who, if not me, then who? Like, we all have to do what we do to feel a certain way. And if it helps someone to feel like confident to not necessarily do what I do, but confident just to maybe go on a school run without your wig on, or to tell a work colleague that you have alopecia, there's these tiny little wins that people can do, and they can feel confidence from, and that can derive from something that you post. So I think that that's something that I will, that's why I continue to do it, because social media as a whole and the content creation as a whole can be very like stressful in regards to engagement and the algorithm and all these things. And it's like, but we need to come back to the fact that the Instagram especially is about community, and a lot of people have been on there for so long harboring that kind of community that it is still important to sort of crack on and keep going, I guess. I think I wake up every day and want to stop and think, if I have to take another selfie, I'm gonna get mad. But it's like, it's more than just a selfie when you're helping people to sort of be their authentic selves and feel happy with how they look and how they feel. And I think it can come down to perhaps feeling like it's, I guess I get a lot of people sometimes like, oh, it's just so, it's not important, like who cares? And I think beauty and hair, it is important to a lot of people, and I don't think it should be disregarded. I think it's become very capitalist. But when we are like in life, especially with women, when we go into in life, when we have recessions, when we have pandemics, when we have all these things happen, the sales that boost are the sales of lipstick, the sales of hair things, the sales of hair bubbles, like all these tiny little things that make you feel better about yourself, especially as a woman. It's like the sale of lipstick goes up every single recession, because it's that mini burst of for you-ness that it just, there's something about it. It just sort of boosts you up and makes you feel better. So I would never ever, as a whole, disregard the beauty industry. I think it's such an important industry to be a part of. And I think people have started to realize that, especially in the UK due to the pandemic, because we have a thing called the British High Street, and the beauty industry and the salons is what makes it. It's built up. Our high street is phone shops and hairdressers. So if we didn't exist, there wouldn't the economy would take a huge knock. And I think that was proven during the pandemic when we weren't able to go and have our hair done or do these things, and it was a big loss to the economy. And I think the British Beauty Council and all these different communities came together to talk to the government to make sure that we were included, because there was a point where it was all rooted in sexism, but there was a point where they opened the barbers but they didn't open the hairdressers. And we were like, what's going on? Like, you can go and have a beard trim, but you couldn't get your eyelashes done during the pandemic. I was like, we either can't do anything or we can do it all. Like, you can't, like, what is more important about a beard trim and a haircut than about a haircut for a woman, highlights or whatever?
What was the reason for that? I guess was it because men's hair, because it's generally shorter, grows faster, therefore it needs to be chopped? Or was there anything of that?
No, it was just purely
whatever reason they came up with is bullshit. It's an excuse.
That's the only reason I could logically think of. Like, okay, typically men have shorter hair, therefore, no, there was none of that.
They purely just forgot about women and how and what the industry as a whole, like, because it was simply a policy that was like, most of the people making these decisions and making these policies were men and Boris Johnson. So it was like, and it's like, what do you care? You don't even cut your hair, Boris. But that's the policy that they decided to make. And it was just that the hair industry, female beauty and female contribution to the economy was kind of forgotten. And it's like, we make up a huge part of entrepreneurs. We make up the beauty industry brings in so much money into this country. It's probably one of the only industries that doesn't struggle to perform, especially during the pandemic. Like, once we were able to go back out and get outside and do things, the first thing a lot of women wanted to do was get their nails done, get their hair done, get their eyebrows done, get their lashes done, do all these things. And it's like, I know it seems frivolous to you, but it's actually the cornerstone of, like, womanhood, I guess. We do these things, we do these things for us. It's not just necessarily for an outward thing. When we look good, we feel good. And I think that's been I think over the last year or so, people have started to realize that we are an important part of the narrative when it comes to the economy, and especially in the UK. So hopefully that will continue, but we shall see.
So before we wrap it up, and as we are talking about that, can you tell us a little bit more about your wig business? And you explained before why you started. It was for yourself at the beginning, but can you tell us a little bit about the evolution of the business for the past 10 years and
well, it's not evolved as much as I think people tend to think. It's very much like a case of, I needed something for myself, I started to share it. It was very organic. It's always been an organic business. I started to share my own wigs. People are like, oh, how did you do this to your hair, blah blah blah, because I was a content creator then. So people are like, oh, I'd like one, I want one. And I was like, oh no, I don't make them for people, like, oh, I'll just do it for myself. And I said that for about a year. And then my partner was like, why are you turning down money? Just make them the wig. Like, when did you become rich? Like, make it for her. And then so I made it for one person, and I made it for another person and another person. And then within a year, it kind of snowballed into an actual business I had no plans to make a business out of making wigs or even doing hair. I worked in the hair industry, but I worked in the capacity as front of house and salon management. So I wasn't doing hair on a day-to-day basis. It was a passion, but it wasn't something that I was continuously doing. I think wigs is probably as far as I can go with social interaction with people. I get very tired very easily, and I don't and being a hairdresser is a very social
job,
kind
yeah.
of it's a very social thing. You have to be on all the time, and it can be very draining. And I find that especially as women, we tell our hairdresser everything, and it can be like you have to sort of like let it either not really sink in or deflect. And I'm a very like empathetic person, so I would be there talking to you for hours about your life, and I'll be like, I'm so sorry, here, take all my money, come and stay at my house. Like I can't. So I had to put sort of a wall between that. And then it's because even when I used to just work on reception, they'd be like, oh, where's Gina, like I need to tell her this, that, the other. I was like, oh my god, I've got to run away because you're just obsessed with me. But no, I just started, it just very organically started to grow, and I learned by myself. I just learned from doing small courses here and there. There was never any like decision making in the process. It just very much happened organically. And I owe a lot of it to already having a social media presence online at the time, so people knew about it, and then word of mouth. So I started the business simply for Black women who need hair replacement services, so need extensions or wigs that look like their hair. I'm very much invested in people looking like their authentic selves, so I only create textures that look like our hair. And that was my point of difference, because no one else was really doing that. When we think about weaves and wigs, we think about like Naomi Campbell style, long, luscious, like, and that is a vibe, and that's a certain aesthetic, and we like that. But my whole vibe is that we create stuff that looks like Afro Black textured hair. And I think that just really I think timing, and at that time it just sort of caught on, and people were really interested and wanted that. And it was, and if I needed it at the time, other people also needed it.
Of course.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like how it snowballed. And since then I've done a couple of workshops where I've taught people how to make the wigs. We've for some reason, I don't know how or why, but we were on a TV show in American Gods, where they used some of the hair pieces, and we've done quite a bit of stage work, so Thriller Live, and something at the Young Vic, and I can't remember the name of the show, but it was like a play, a Black play that came over here. Just prior to the pandemic, so it got cut short. But we've done quite a few little bits like that, and editorials. So, and again, this has all been word of mouth and organic, so it hasn't been something that I've really even had to push. It's all come, touch wood, very easily and very simply, which is, I guess, when you get to, because I have 2 children, it's like perfect for me, because not that I don't want to work hard, and I guess that old adage where they say, oh, I didn't want a 9 to 5, but now I work 24/7, is kind of, it is true. Like I don't want to work for anybody, and then I thought, oh, this is going to be so much easier, but it really isn't. There's so much more that I have to do. But it's almost like I try and be, I've gotten a much better work-life balance now, and I think that's what drives me. What's important to me is being able to work for myself and be able to create something that's a passion, as opposed to feeling like work. When it feels like work, I kind of feel like I don't want to do it anymore. And and that doesn't mean it's not hard. It just means it doesn't, even when I'm working hard, it still feels like I'm working towards an end that is, a mission, I guess. And that has always been to support Black women during their hair loss journey. And that's still the mission today, regardless of whether celebrities wear the hair, or whether it's in a TV show, or whether it's on a stage show. The underlying sort of essence of it is that it's about me sharing what I know and helping my community, I guess. And I think that's I think that's how it's been able to sustain through a pandemic, through, you know, ups and downs of supply issues and all sorts of things. It's just been a crazy ride, but it seems to have continued to work out. And I think mostly due to the fact that I'm living this journey along with the people who are purchasing from me. So I get so many emails from women who are like, "Oh, I've got hair loss," and da, da, da. And it's like, yeah, same girl, same. So we're sort of in the same boat. So it becomes less of a like a money making venture, as opposed to a kind of, I guess, a mission to service these people who are going through the same thing that you're going through.
Yeah.
And I think that's been something that's sort of that's what's kept me going and keeping doing it, as opposed to just being like, oh, because it is tiring and it's a lot, but it is, at the end of the day, my vision for it has always been the same and it hasn't changed. And because it's not necessarily something that I want, I'm happy that it's successful, but I don't do it for success or monetary success. I do it for the people who need it, regardless. And, you know, I do other things, and I do content creating and do other things and advocacy and modeling. But yeah, there's a lot intertwined into it, but the wigs are the mainstay, and my wig business is what's my passion. So, and I think it's probably one of the most important things that has come out of my hair loss. And it's because of my hair loss that I do it. So there's people like, oh, so, you know, like, would you ever want your hair back? Because like every good thing that's happened to me since 2012 is mostly due to the fact that my hair fell out. And do I wake up sometimes and think, oh, I wish I had hair? Yeah, absolutely. But I think if a cure landed in my lap right now, I would chuck it away. I wouldn't take it, because I think that there's so much work that still needs to be done, that I think, and I've done so much work on myself to accept myself as I am now, to then change back and not be that person anymore. It's sort of not that it undoes it, but it's like, what was the point of all that work? It was like, it was a lot of hard work learning to re-love myself and how I look. So yeah, it's been a long journey, but it's been a positive one overall.
Thank you so much, Gina, honestly, for sharing everything that we've been talking about for the past hour and a half, because I've learned a lot personally about the topic, and, you know, through your personal experiences, I'm sure you brought value to me, and I'm sure you brought value and you help other people. So thank you for that. Thank you for your openness and vulnerability to talk about this very personal, you know, topic, because it is personal and it takes courage, I think, to put it out there. It's not that easy.
Thank you.
Before we wrap it up, we have just one last question.
Yes, this is a question that we ask all of our guests. If you could have a conversation with anybody, dead or alive, famous or not famous, it literally can be anybody ever, who you think would be the most interesting person, who would you choose and what would you want to talk about?
Oh, that is a very interesting question. Who would I want to talk to even? There's so many. The first person who came to my head, and I don't know why, but I'm going to roll with the first person who came to my head, would be Eartha Kitt, because I think she's beautiful. She was beautiful and amazing, and I feel like she would have a lot of secrets. I feel like she'd know a lot of the celebrity gossip that we probably wouldn't know. And I just think that that would just be an interesting conversation, because she was a very dynamic, exuberant woman. And I find that her whole vibe was just amazing. She was like very sexy. She was very outspoken, especially for her time. And I'd just like to have a chat and a drink and have her purr in my ear. It would be awesome. So I think the more I think about it, definitely Eartha Kitt.
We've never had that response
No.
before. It's so interesting asking this question because every time we get someone different. So thank you so much for sharing. And thank you, like Jeremy said, thank you for sharing your whole story and teaching us. Because like I said, I thought alopecia was just stress and you could cure it. And like I didn't know anything before, you know, obviously you taught us about it. So thank you so much for sharing all of that information. And yeah, we'll leave everything linked in the show notes in the description box. So your Instagram, your website, the wig shop as well. We'll leave everything there so people can go ahead and find you and say hello. And we'll be back next Wednesday with a brand new episode. But thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.
Yeah, and thank you everyone
for having me.
Thank you everyone for watching and listening, and we'll see you next week. Bye bye.